I would put a big long history up here because my history is I'm an end user. And I hack together an occasional little bit of C code to keep things going. But I started initially teaching myself C. And I did that 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what people who either have programming skills or would like to have programming skills can do to try to move Ecom Station and its support software forward. First thing that I want to point out is when you choose a program, when you get started in this, choose something that you want to do, something that's important to you. I started with FM2 because that's the file manager I've used for 16 years, probably when I first started working on it. You've got a bunch of choices. You've got a bunch of orphan programs out there. You've got some projects that are under development. There are still a handful of commercial and shareware things. PML is a good example of that type of stuff. A lot of stuff is coming from porting, and obviously you could do a program from scratch, something that doesn't exist out there. Probably the most common time that happens is when somebody's trying to replace an OS2 component. New View comes to mind. Large number of candidates. GitHub OS2 has over 1,000 repositories. There's 1,087 was the last time that I looked. Couple things to do if you go out there. Check to see if that program is being developed and is somewhere else at the same time. FM2 is the one that comes to, or FTE is the one that comes to mind. It's an editor. Well, EFTE, which I'm developing, is quite a bit advanced from that, and it's actually up on NetLabs. And you probably didn't need to know the two are the same program. But you want to do a little research because oftentimes you can get into a development situation where you're essentially reinventing something that someone else has already done a lot of work on. Now, the NetLabs programs tend to be active. I would say that all are, probably to a lesser extent now than they were at one point. The first thing you want to do is just communicate with the development team. Most of the OS2 developers are going to be happy to get help. You know, you will find exceptions to that, but
yeah, I can get grumpy.
Well, you got to consider what you getting help means. It means, here, you can do this. But the real advantage to finding a project that already has a team working on it, particularly if you're not that familiar with either OS2 programming or programming in general, is the other people on it will help you. They'll critique your code, they'll tell you, they'll eventually tell you how to write that section of code after you've tried 60 times and not gotten it quite right. Now, commercial and shareware is still possible. PML is the example that comes to mind. If you really wanted to, I'm sure Neil would let you sign a non-disclosure agreement and give you access to that code. I have access to it, Steve has access to it, probably other people in this room do that, so that we can work on our attempt to fix, or at least help with tracking down where some of the bugs might be. If you're going to go out and find somebody who has a shareware program or commercial software where the development has just stopped and you want them to open source it, You want to be careful about how that gets done. You want to make sure that it gets licensed in a way that you can use it. Particularly if you're planning on combining it with something. Because the Mozilla license 1.5 or lower you can't use with GPL, at least you can't legally use with GPL. I'm sure that's happening all the time. But, and there's other cases like that, so that if you are going to go to all the trouble to get somebody to put something out as open source, make sure it gets licensed in such a way that we can get maximum utility out of it. Porting. The real advantage to port.
Can I interrupt one?
Sure.
Wait, there are licenses that you consider that are not good, open source license that gives you problems?
There are open source licenses, like the example I gave, that you can't use another license with it. There are two open source licenses, but you can't mix the code from the two projects, is the one example. There also are licenses that are more or less restricted as to what can be done. Some of the licenses, like GPL, you have to return all the code for everything, at least if you distribute it. I mean, if I can do anything I want to keep the program for myself, but if I distribute it, I have to get the code back. There are some of the licenses where that's really not entirely true.
It's not true at all.
Yeah.
It's a DSP license.
Yeah. So you do want to be a little careful about how you get, if you talk somebody into releasing it, how that happens. And obviously you may not have any say over that. They may dictate that I'll do it, but I will only do it this way.
There's a lot of licenses that also say, and these are sort of always two specific licenses, that it's open, you may freely use this and the source, unless you're a commercial user.
Yeah.
But that doesn't fall on the open source specification.
Yeah, but
If it says that,
a lot of OSP stuff, okay, if it says that.
it's only sharing the sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
And that's
So just a point to keep it.
Is Mozilla an example of that second case there now, because the stuff was all stripped out, right? The for Firefox, the OS2 specific code is now gone, isn't it?
I've heard that. I don't know the specific truth to that. Depending on how you keep it's not gone in the sense that we still have it.
No, I understand that, but it's not a part of the official.
It may not be in the main trunk of the Mozilla, but as long as you're following the code, it's relatively easy to patch it back in. It's if you waited 10 versions and tried to patch it back in, so much would have changed, it'd probably be next to impossible. But you can, if you keep moving up, so the code still is there.
So those
I don't
guys,
know that it's in the trunk.
like, are those guys? There's the Mozilla repository. So what's that company that does this now? Bitwise.
Yeah.
They do that. They pull from there, but they can't check back in, and then they have their own repository, and they have to merge them, or what happens?
Wrong word. Not that they can't check it, it's that the Mozilla folks don't want it.
Well, whatever, but
Yeah, but there's a difference. It's a difference in fact.
Well, and the truth is they probably could check in if they were to fix some common code problem. In other words,
That's probably true too.
they probably, if they fixed part of the the engine or something that was independent of OS2, they probably could check it back in.
But only that fix, but only the common fix.
Right.
They couldn't under the hood move back in all the OS2 fixes.
Yeah, and you might be able to get away with that too. So I really don't know the truth of the politics of that. So it would all be speculation on my part to say what they can and cannot check in and what has and has not been taken out. But again, you may or may not be able to commit the specific OS2 code back to their trunk code to the main SVN or whatever it's on.
Well, as it stands right now, just technically, we have no one that's OS2 based that has commit rights.
Yeah.
So, the only thing we can do is put a bug in, supply the patch and all that, and then let it go through the review process. But it's a known fact that if you supply the patch and it's got OS2 specific code in it, it won't survive the review process, so it will not get checked in. But the reality is that goes for every other piece of patch code that goes into Mozilla. It's got to go in the right way. And it's more than just platform. It's style, function, test case, all of that stuff. It just so happens that they don't want to have to pay for the resources of supporting minor platforms. And we're not the only one. And it's the same reason that C-Monkey is no longer a Mozilla Foundation project, nor is Thunderbird. So that they provide some support in giving them repository space, but it's really their job, the C-Monkey and Thunderbird Porter's job to make sure maintain compatibility. But it's an easier job for them because they're only doing it for Windows and Linux.
Some ports have been, now I'm talking about old programs that were ported long ago, reported as EMX. And you want to know that because if you try to build them with CLib, it doesn't work. Because depending on how the libraries were built and everything like that, the naming conventions aren't the same. So you need to make sure you're aware of that.
What is EMX exactly? Is that, first of all, is there source code for that project?
I think there is. Well, sure, there is somewhere. Whether it's open or not, I don't know.
Doesn't everybody know what EMX stands for?
No.
It's somebody's
It's
name.
Eberhard Matty's extensions.
Yeah. And what it is it's just an extension to OS2 that allows
No,
the
well, it's extensions to the GCC compiler, so it runs until it does OS2.
Right.
So you can use it to build OS2 applications.
One question, something that I really got confused in the last years. For the very new GCC versions, do you still need EMX or is this completely replaced?
No, it's CLib.
And it's even better than that. It's probably incompatible. Like as he found, which is one of the reasons he did his EMX installer, was to prevent breaking GCC. Because some of the DLLs have the same name.
And when did EMX go away in the GCC?
Well, in terms of what do you, relative to what? EMX?
You just said you don't need EMX to use the newest compiler. When did that become true?
It was always true. Ever
With
since
3.5, didn't
3.5,
the older ones used it? Didn't they?
No,
Nobody?
3.2, yeah.
3.2.2 was the first version that had the CLib.
In other words, that made EMX superfluous.
Right.
Oh, that's what
CLib, the same thing
Yeah,
as
CLib is in a sense the same as EMX.
Okay.
You mean live C? That's what you.
Yeah.
Now, technically, it's KLibC because he's the guy who wrote it, but everybody else calls it libc generally. We drop the K for some reason. Because it's named in the DLL too.
So that provides all the stuff that was required in EMX or
Well, it
replaces it.
replaces what EMX provided.
Okay.
Not all of it, because some of the stuff like the compiler, linker, library, and all that sort of stuff comes out of GCC. And there are still EMX components that will work. Like if you need import libraries and all that, we still use the EMX import library tool for certain things. Not everything, but for certain things. So some of them you have to use the replacement that KLibC or GCC provides.
And if you look at the source code of the KLibC, you'll also see that there's an EMX portion where he brought some of that in. So,
Right.
So that's 3.2.2?
well, 3.2.2 is the first version that Newt ported over.
Okay.
You know, the 3.2.1, like I was talking about earlier in that day, that was the last version that was pre-KLibC.
Right. And that had like the EMX new directory tree and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So the example is Darwin O'Connor's MMOS2 plugins, the MP3 and etc. Those were all done in EMX originally. And so MP3, the plugin has always been broken. It will claim any file you point it at, it can handle. And obviously that's not the way MMOS2 is supposed to work. So that bothered me when I was fixing image, which is one of Mark Kimes' old utilities. And so I went to fix it. Well, of course, if you try to build it with GCC, modern GCC, it doesn't work very well. So I had to go out and find the libs that were actually built with GCC instead of EMX. The old ones were EMX and the new ones were GCC. And then I found out what backward compatibility means to libs. Now, MP3 actually worked when I finally found the right lib, but it's only moved up a tenth of a point anyways. FLAC has been rewritten to the point that all the function names are different. And there's a short readme that says, we did this, figure it out on your own from the header files. For Vobius, they split one lib into 4. And of course, 10 years later, there's no concurrent documentation. I mean, had Dave Yeo not known what had happened, I would still not know why they didn't build. And I've got 2 out of 3 of them built now. And the other piece with all the porting is the Qt ports. We've got a pretty good Qt version right now that works with a lot of things. But it also, if you go to version 5, is not backward compatible. So, or forward compatible, whichever way you want to think about it. Okay. And just my observation, if you're going to write something from scratch, we really don't need to do it in Shell. So you might want to start somewhere else.
Tell Dave to build that.
The reason that I see for writing something from scratch is to replace components in the system. In other words, you really don't need to write a word processor from scratch. You really don't need to write a text editor from scratch. There are ones out there that you've got a good core to start from. But New View is an example of something that there really wasn't anything out there, because the only other one was Old View, which was part of the system. IPFC is it's the IPF compiler from OpenWatcom, which, by the way, you have to go out and compile or ask one of us to give to you, because it's never been released. But if somebody wants it, just shoot me an email and I'll send you. And you do want the newest one, because some of the old ones are broken. And then things like drivers and reverse engineering drivers, which is really fun.
What about development tools? Like, not that so many of us are capable of doing this kind of stuff, but like, you know, Smedley, for example.
I'm going to talk about
Okay, all right.
Okay. Sorry about this. Part of the slides got out. Okay, for programming, first thing you're going to want to have is a version of tools, because you have to get the source code somehow. And while you can download them as zip files, this is a lot easier, because it's going to keep track of your changes relative to the originals, and it's going to get you a way to get any other changes that someone else might put up there. CVS, SVN, Git are the most common material. There's a whole bunch of them. But what you want is a tool for the project. Whatever it's in, you're not going to convince somebody to take it out of an SVN and put it in Git if it's already in the SVN.
Now, we don't have Smart Git, really, do we?
Yeah, we do.
We do?
Mm-hmm. They all have a smart version. The smart version of Smart Git is like 2.18.
Oh, so
In other words, they're
far
old.
enough
Yeah, if you
to
go
get
back
rid of
far
some
enough.
clips.
If-
Okay.
Yeah. All of them I found. In fact, you can actually get one that's a little farther advanced than 2.18 if you're willing to go in and hack the warning for that you've got an old version of the command line yet.
Okay, I know that.
Yeah. But they're all older versions.
But that should be a non-problem, because now we have a new Git.
Well, it doesn't read version number right. It still tells you you have an old version of
I
Git.
see.
In other words, you just have to go in and hack the check.
But is that even with Dimitri's most recent build?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the one I have, but it's clear to me that, because I type version, and yeah, it says it's version, I don't remember what it is, but whatever it is, and this still gives me the error that the version is, which in truth, maybe that the version doesn't make any sense to it because it has a range or something, and so it's too high a version in reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, all of them take a little work. You have to have Java 6 installed, and all of them check because they are supposed to only run with Sun Java. However, they were gracious enough to put in a command switch that you can put in the CMD file that overrides that so that it will work.
This is only if you want to use the Java stuff to.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
well,
If you want
this-
to,
The regular clients, you don't need any of this stuff. You just
No, if you're just getting
it to work.
SVN, EXE, or
Yeah.
Git EXE,
Command line.
yeah, you don't need that. It's just that these make a nice GUI, and they're nice to manage.
There's a follow-up company who bought this SVN stuff, and they're still producing new versions. The one problem is that they're all based on SWT.
Yeah,
We don't have the SWT library.
well, there's a project underway to fix that.
yeah, but that's the reason all of them got switched to SWT, and we don't have the library, so that's why we're plateaued at a certain place. You can buy a professional version of this, which unlocks some additional features. I've never really seen the need. The only thing that it's meant to me is there is a very rare something that I have to do where I have to actually break down and use the command line utility. But in other words, you're not really getting any support because you're backloaded so far.
The command line's not so bad, by the way. You make it sound awful. I use it all the time at work.
It's a matter of how you think.
You just have to learn how to use it.
Right. No, I understand. I'm not telling anybody there's anything wrong with the command line versions. If that's what you prefer. This happens to be what I prefer, but I know there's nothing wrong.
But you have to say that this client has merging features in some
Yeah,
stuff
sure.
built
All
on
that
top
stuff
of the naked SVN, so
Yeah,
it helps. For me, it helps.
Yeah, and especially for someone that's somewhat new to this sort of stuff, it's
You don't mind merging source code by hand?
The other thing,
yeah, right. I guess that. Okay, compilers. We basically have two. We have OpenWatcom and GCC.
well, for C compilers, yes.
Yeah, C compilers. That's what I'm doing. I'm sorry. I only do C. And there are.
You need your flexibility.
Yeah. And obviously VAC is still usable. There are still projects out there that are VAC. A lot of all those, probably the majority of those old orphan projects that are out there are VAC or even CSET.
We don't have too much stuff that's CSET. Commercial stuff, yes, but not, the stuff that our end users use. I'd say the vast majority of that these days is actually GCC.
For GCC, pay the 10 euros to Paul, download his environment and install it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel on your own. That's just my advice. You can do whatever, but it's reasonably complete. It's got, command files to set up the environment, everything like that. And it's got parts that he's found they work together. That way, you really don't have to worry about you've got the wrong version of Perl or you've got whatever. But these particular pieces have been shown to work together. And you may want to tinker with it later on your own, but I wouldn't start anyplace else.
You have to pay to get the disk shipped, is that right? Or is that what?
It's,
Or
it's,
just
it's
download?
10 euros. He did ship them on discs for a while because he thought that was easier, but the postage rates have gone up in Australia. So I did this relatively recently, and he said he would send me a disc if I really wanted, and I just told him that, you know, I would prefer him to get the money than for the postage service to get the money, so I just downloaded it.
Now, when he comes out with a new GCC, is anything inside of that that's required to make it run on OS2 kind of always stay the same? And he's just recompiling the latest version of the code, or what happens there? You know, or
What you can do with it is the way that his disk is set up. There's, I think there were 8 versions of GCC on it, something like that. The one that he gave to me had 8 versions of it, and then a command file for each one. And so each one of those was in a GCC directory that had its number following it. So if a new GCC comes out, I can simply unzip it into yet another directory with its number and either modify one of the existing command files or make a new command file that just points to that
Well, he
directory.
almost always ships the command file too. That's what.
yeah,
Well, but I'm just
Using
saying.
his environment, you basically can unzip the new GCC right into
Right.
that environment because that's where it came from.
yeah, there's just enough to get it to work usually.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
the
it's-
assumption is you
it-
have a working environment and you're just you're just basically upgrading the compiler.
Yeah.
The only thing I found from his was there were a couple of the command files weren't quite right. In other words, he had changed something after 4.52 had been done, and he forgot to change that command file to put the right Perl version or something like that. But they were basically really pretty good. And obviously, the other problem with them, you want to install it to a U drive, you don't have the option at all. It's just much, much simpler.
I would recommend not installing it anywhere else but the U drive. Because the problem is once you do that, you have to understand what you need to change.
Yeah, but, and then the only other things you need to change is like it's got the path to open to Watcom because it uses the Watcom linker and things like that, which in your case may be different than what is in his. So you have to scan through and make sure that also the toolkit directory those were the 2 things I had to change, was the toolkit directory and the open Watcom directory, which is pretty seamless.
Why do you need so many different versions of GCC?
I didn't. He just
Not just interested, I mean.
he gave me his environment. He's developing those. He's actively working on them, and I think runs his comparison and considers some of them stable and not.
There's actually a reason for it.
Okay.
The bleeding edge GCC is usually better unless it doesn't work. In which case you will use the older one.
Yeah.
That is known to work for that application that you were building.
Yeah, we use it for PM mail because it won't compile under a newer one.
And the new version, so you
Yeah.
use an older
Yeah.
version.
Now, at some point in time, someone will actually go look and figure out why it doesn't compile and
Yeah.
fix GCC or fix PM mail.
We should
But, you
fix
know,
PM mail, but
But everything takes time.
It's our fault, but
And
Yeah.
like I said, I just got it down. I specifically didn't have a reason
Yeah.
that I had all of them, except that that's what I downloaded, and I was too lazy to.
Also
delete
on
it.
Linux, you always install with, like the version numbers are embedded in what you put it into, and then you create those soft links to that place, so you can use the same name all the time, but on OS2 you
Right,
can do
but
that.
that's
So
just for, but you can do the same, you can pretty much do the same thing because I have a GCC dev script that I've written. And it knows how to find the latest, greatest GCC unless I override it, and it sets up the environment just perfectly in that command line session. And does everything else it needs to make me able to do that stuff. Paul's scripts are a little more naive. It's just the way he writes them. And the same with his disk. You are really getting a copy of his U drive. Okay?
Yeah.
And it may even have a couple backup files on it. It may have files with tilde on the end you can clean up.
Yeah,
They have stuff
that's
he never
true.
uses anymore because what he's giving you what he says he's giving you. He's not giving you a commercial distribution of anything.
Yeah.
He's giving you what he's built that works.
Yeah, and it works quite well.
He's giving you his building environment.
Yeah.
He really needs it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily it works. The works part is, we never know for sure.
Yeah, but it does.
What works, works. Let's leave it at that.
One just note, because when you open his command files to set up the environment, you will occasionally get the error message that there was a line that was too long. In other words, my lib path plus his lib path equals something that doesn't fit because it's over 2048. You have to remember what's being truncated is whatever was right on the end of your lib path. So you have, if it's,
And it may not matter.
well, that was what I was going to say, is in most cases it probably doesn't matter. If you're really afraid that it matters, just go into either yours or his and get rid of stuff that you, I mean, there's link paths in there for stuff that I wouldn't even know what it was for.
You'll find out.
Yeah, eventually. But no, they're for what is clearly multimedia stuff and things like that, where I would, at least at that moment, wouldn't have any use for it. So basically, my first advice would be, is if it happens, just ignore it unless something doesn't work.
You know, like you found out you truncated OS2DLL. And that's no longer the path.
Yeah, but, hey, who needed it?
Exactly. And actually, it doesn't matter anyhow because it's the begin line path.
Also, what's up with Wacom? It seems to have kind of died. Is it just...
Wacom has been forked. That's what I was going to talk about. It is actually
So we're forked?
very, well, the 2.0 release from the fork still has the OS2 installer and everything like that. Now, rather, it just happens that when he hit build, that's what comes out, and he doesn't care, or rather, it's been, tested and et cetera, that we're not sure about. And some of the bleeding edge code for OS2 is actually in the original. It's the code that you did, and I don't know if that's been pulled over to you.
Well, what he does is he pulls regularly, or based on what I saw of his GitHub, he pulls in the perforce repository, the perforce and git report, and I'm thinking he probably merged it, but whether he does people merge or full-on merge. But basically, the problem with Open Wacom is the original developers have pretty much all gone away. We're doing other things. And, Jerry drove a couple of them away because he writes crummy code until you fix it. Code's good. It always takes 2 or 3 runs before it actually works right. And certain people have less patience with that than others. And, he's off doing his own thing. He seems happy. I haven't actually tried his stuff yet because basically, as he mentioned, I need the bleeding edge stuff. And we needed the ability to do debug data for Firefox builds. So, it doesn't. And he may have pulled that in, he may not have.
Yeah, the high memory stuff in the linker.
But
The high memory
yeah, the
stuff in the
support for the
linker.
linker and all that, yeah. Well, there was the patch was there, but that patch was not good enough. Because what I did is I tore that out and I actually put in high memory malloc support. With a little bit of control. Along the lines of what Odyssey does, but not as fully featured whenever you need it.
So the programming part is easy. Once you have your environment,
Exactly.
you download the code, and if it's GCC, run one of Paul's scripts, whichever one of the compilers you want to try first. And then you either type make, wmake, or nmake, depending on which compiler you're using.
Does CMake work on OS2?
There is a version.
I will say there are projects that require CMake.
Yeah.
And what compiler, like that has knowledge of the details of compilers and stuff, right?
Yeah, it understands BCC.
Nothing else?
Paul has a CMake distribution for the things that ports that require CMake.
Okay.
And those are probably all going to be GCC. Because no one but IBM folks use Visual Age. They don't use it anymore.
But,
Seems like all the Visual HQ tool chain stuff has died.
but you have to understand, even when I'm using GCC, the first command I type is WMake. Doesn't work very well, but but that's
Yeah.
just my habit because I use Wacom pretty
I know,
much
I
exclusively.
did that so often, I built myself an M.command script. That sort of used, but 98% of the time, without help, can figure out whether I need WMake, which one.
But one of the other things is if you're trying to use Open Wacom to build these programs that still are VAC originally, a lot of times if you use the -M switch, they'll build or at least come pretty close to building.
Until they hit the link stage.
It's MS. I can't type either. Sorry. And then you fix the compiler errors.
And then it'll run.
No, it won't run. But then you're at the point where you can start
Or
working
you
on it.
quickly moved on to the next slide.
Of course,
Compiles no
if
errors.
it compiles with no errors, testing is complete.
That's how Paul does it, I know that.
And then obviously you're gonna need some scripting languages and some basic understanding of scripting for anything that's some of the smallest projects, because they're gonna use some of these sorts of things. Those are rules that come to mind. There are probably 10,000 others.
So if he has a Perl, why are you doing Perl? Is that the date or something?
I don't think Paul really wants to do Perl. I think that was something required for what he wanted to do. So he ported it as far as he needed it, and that's that. So there are certain if you're a Perl programmer, there's fundamental things about existing Perl ports that just don't work.
Right.
And similar to what I did with rsync. Paul actually did the first rsync and S-tunnel ports and stuff like that. And when I started using rsync, I said, wait a minute, this is not really OS2 native enough for me. So the port I do is both aren't fully compatible, but it also does enough of the OS2 native stuff so people don't get bit by it. It understands // it's all that sort of stuff. It knows how to back up OS2 permissions and OS2 attributes. So you actually, and the extended attributes were there, but they need a little bit of work. So, it's a different type of port. And the original Perl ports we had back in the days when Ilya was doing it,
Those were the last ones I think that fully worked.
they were very good OS2 functionality. We understood extended attributes, WPS, all of this stuff. And that's just suffered a lot of bit rot in the latest ports because no one cared. But Robert does.
So
I like Perl. I'm motivated.
Now, Perl's a good
With,
language, no doubt. These days it seems
with
to be
Paul's
losing a little popularity
development
because, it's a fun
environment,
language because it's hard to read.
you get all of the basic
Yeah,
basic
you like
Rex
ports,
comes to
too.
the operating system, but you get all of the scripting languages that are commonly used in things. I'm sure that eventually, if you port enough things, you'll find one that requires something that isn't there.
You know if anybody's ever tried to port that newer Rex, open object?
Oh, people have tried, and people have failed.
I know there's
Yeah.
at least three separate.
Three attempts?
Pardon?
Three separate attempts. Two of them were going on at the same time. One of them was trying to do it with back. Another was trying to do it with Open Wacom. They were both doing it concurrently. I tried to do it with GCC, but I don't get very far until it hits something I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. I still haven't figured it out. So
Yeah.
If someone actually did most of the work, I would assist getting an open object Rex port working that would actually give us the proper integration. Because that code is not there, and that sort of have to be re-implemented.
You mean the thing to make it work like the one that comes with it does?
Well, yeah, the thing where basically it integrates with the shells. And the API for that is defined. It's really not that, it's just a matter of implementing it. And maybe if we ask really nicely, someone who actually has the source might give it to us. Don't know for sure, but maybe Colin Shaw, has enough rights to do that stuff. We will do it. And also the original object reference developer is still the guy who's doing the vast majority of the work. And I'm sure he knew that code, because I think he was responsible for the OS2 port for object recs too. It's just, again, interest. They weren't interested in maintaining it because they didn't have the ability to test it, because none of the people that were core developers were using OS2.
Well, actually, the problem was IBM would not release. I remember I talked to Chip Davis, is that his last name? He when I was talking to him about it at the time, IBM would not give this OS2 source code.
Yeah, but maybe times have changed, and also right now we have one of the core developers for Open Object Recs. It's not Chip, I forget if it's Ray. They won't come to me, because I just hang out, skim that list. But he's the guy that tells everybody what's in the internals. And my understanding is, he may have, so, it can't hurt to ask again.
Yeah.
But the point is, it doesn't pay to ask unless someone's going to actually follow through and do the builds. But we could fairly easily get a command line version without the integration that worked like, any of the other Regina Recs or something like that. That's just a matter of getting the compiler out. And stubbing out all the stuff that is Windows specific with GUI and all that. And there's some benefit to that because we would end up with a faster Rex with nice object rec features.
Okay, I'll continue with a little understatement.
Shouldn't you say that? It's more like, I once heard there was a programmer who did some documentation.
Doesn't the code speak for itself?
If you can't read the code, you shouldn't be messing with it.
The other problem
That hasn't
is
stopped many people.
for FM2, for example, I'll occasionally get an email from somebody asking me how to use such and such, and it's really kind of shocking because I don't know that it was in the program. It's like,
Yeah.
what? And I'll have to go dig through and actually find it to figure out, okay, is it here? Did it really ever get implemented and isn't just a menu choice?
Well, it's not all that. Don't forget, when we got the code for that, we were with 2 versions. Some of the stuff was there but not there.
Yeah, and we still haven't figured out entirely what code was going out and what code was coming in. We've still got some of it just commented out. Documentation is best done by somebody who uses the program, not by somebody who writes the program. Because they understand what they finally learn by playing around with the program.
This is all excellent observations. The one thing that I would add to that, though, is that the users, let's say you've got a user who's interested in developing documentation. He also has to have the programmer work with him sometimes to clarify what's going on. So it really needs to be a cooperative effort.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I'd be much happier proofreading somebody else's documentation for FM2 than writing it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
But there's also, doing documentation is like porting something. You have to be willing to crash and burn. You have to take that program and actually run it through its paces and not worry about the fact that it may not do what you think it should do all the time.
Yeah. Doesn't do what you think it should do all the time.
And a corollary to that too is programmers, you can never anticipate exactly how your users are going to use your code.
Which is what crashes some code.
They will do things that you never expected.
Yeah.
That field doesn't take a dash, really. Numbers.
So WPIFC is the new IFP compiler, and the real advantage to it at this point in time, I don't think it does anything over what the IBM one does inherently, but it can be fixed, whereas the old one cannot.
And it has expensively more capacity than the old one.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is the one thing.
And it has,
Take a bigger
it has
file.
different bugs.
Yeah, clearly.
Nevertheless.
Viper help is available on Hobbs, and it's a reasonable tool for converting either text files or HTML to IPF. file format if you want to make standard OS2 new view style help files. There's also some other conversion tools for converting a couple of other formats, which work to varying degrees. I'll just leave it at that. So, other things that you need to look at is installers, warping, of course, is the classic one. Yum RPMs, I know nothing about it other than to mention it, that's all I'm going to say. But this is one of the areas where developers also fall down pretty badly generally, is that, you know, it's really sort of beyond my scope to put files in a zip file.
Work
And you really want me to do a warp it?
Well, the thing is the reality is they're tasks that can be done by an end user, but they take a lot of work. Think how much time John took getting the work in right, and then even getting the release tool right.
Well, and what's great about that is I've stolen the release tool and I've used it for 2 other projects.
Yeah.
It actually works very well.
Oh yeah, but it was not a trivial task.
Oh no, it took him a long time and a lot of work. And that's the last thing. If we have people out there who are simply building the code and trying it, that helps. It goes a long way to prevent us from releasing something that has a really, really glaring defect in it that was something we just didn't try.
Like USB on 2.2?
Yeah. No, it's like, you know, John particularly has done a real good job for us on FM2. Things like we get this odd double free error message if you click on the name of something and edit it in the container. You then, when you empty the container, get this double free message, which I think I finally fixed. But that was something that, since neither of us edited file names that way, neither of us had the faintest idea it happened.
So you need someone to document that you shouldn't change file names using that method?
Maybe I should have had John do that instead.
That's the idea.
No, we're perfectly willing to try to fix the interesting problems so that we don't know they exist.
Yeah, I'm fine trying
that I
to
don't
fix
know
it,
about.
but I can't fix. That's it. You can't fix what you don't
I
know.
won't say that's 100% true, but I actually do see things that are wrong in the code every now and then, looking at other areas, looking at other things. I was like, this just doesn't work right, we fix it. But when you deal with a lot of code, the chances of actually seeing everything is minimal.
Okay. Text editors. Everyone has their favorite. EPM is
For
out.
one thing for EPM, if you're doing documentation, EPM does have an HTML plugin, and I think it has a plugin for doing IPFC.
Yeah. Well, it has the package on NetLabs, which has the code marking and coloration and stuff like that. The problem is the core doesn't have. We don't have source code to.
Yeah.
And so if there's any core bugs, you can't fix it. FTE is up on Hobbs. In fact, I did the last update of FTE about 3 years ago. I switched over to EFTE after it got forked, and I've extensively updated it, but never gotten around to
Yeah, you
replacing
need
it.
someone to do an installer and documentation, right?
Well, I did. I kind of did both of those. For documentation, I ripped the HTML off of the FTE website, and of course, it's not accurate, but it's better than nothing. I did try to fix. I mean, some people attempt to fix it, and that's one of the projects that I ripped off the release tool. So I actually have the warped built, but I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do the configuration files, because the problem with it is you can go in and the configuration files are just text files, and you can go in and edit them. you're not supposed to. You're supposed to edit a separate file, which won't get overwritten, but I still haven't figured out the best way to prevent my simply overwriting people's
Unfortunately.
diligent changes.
Yeah, unfortunately, probably what you're gonna need is little rets doing that merge.
Yeah, and that hasn't happened. If anybody wants to try EFT, if you want to email me, I'll send people copies of what I currently have.
Or you can go out to SDN and pull the code, build it.
Yeah, you can do that.
That's a text-based.
Now, if you build it and fix something, I'll even give you commit privileges.
That's a text user interface, that FTE.
Oh.
No, there's a PM and there's a VIO version. And I use the PM version, so the VIO version maybe doesn't run anymore. I wouldn't know. I do occasionally fire it up to at least prove it will run, but I don't use it enough to be sure that I haven't broken something in it. And then you have to think of other tools, grep, set, can you still get to the Mozilla Tools package? Are those links still
The
there?
IBM supplied ones?
Well, not the IBM supplied ones. It's the one that was on the page that told you how to build Mozilla back when the back was.
That page sort of got updated, so what you need, it's got proper links.
Yeah.
And if not, what you do is you just post to the proper place and they'll fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that particular set of tools contain these, and it contains versions that seem to work reasonably
But the
well.
other way to look at it too is if you get Paul's build environment, I think you'll get all of it.
I think you get most of them anyways. And some other things that you might think about. PMPrintf is actually quite nice for debugging, especially for debugging things like the L-switcher plugin, which it's real hard to get it to write to anything, but it writes real nicely to this. So it's something to think about for being able to check and debug. There is at least one C syntax checker out on Hobbs that you can run against your code, which will point out your obvious stupid errors, like your index number is one too small on a variable and things like that. Stuff that compilers don't catch, but that as soon as you see it, your problem is obvious. Indent is just a program which will clean up and reformat. If you download one of these programs and you don't at all like the way the code is laid out, this will fix 95% of it into whatever format you would like to have it in, so that you can read the code easier. And then ExceptQ is an extremely nice tool to plug into all of anything that you happen to build, because it will give you the trap information. Just make sure whoever's using it and telling you they're trapping on exit hasn't set it up to give you a trap file on exit, which you can do in configure sys. Thank you, Lewis.
You mean because this won't get control if you do that?
Well, no, what it does,
reports.
it's just a report. It's telling you what the exit handler is doing, basically. Now, Mommy Make It Stop. That comes from FM2. I don't know, did it ever get taken out of the setup?
I haven't looked yet.
I haven't looked recently either. It's from Markheim's. And this is just a list of miscellaneous oddities I've come across. There is a drag limit in OS2. There is a 64K buffer that you can overrun. It will tell you nothing about it. And what it does is it simply hoses whatever's beyond it. And if that happens to be part of the kernel, you've really got a problem. I've never overdrawn that drag limit without losing the system eventually. I mean, I might not have right then.
You're going to wipe something out for use.
In containers, if you have 32,001 items and are using a mouse, the scroll wheel no longer works.
It's not just, unfortunately, we are using containers.
Yeah.
And we have never gotten, at least with FM2, we've never gotten around to re-implementing it.
Yeah, and then in this, nobody needs 32,000 items in a container.
Ask
anyways.
PM
We were, I don't remember what we were
That's the
testing.
PM mail end user base.
Yeah.
They all want 32,000 items.
Yeah.
Or more.
High memory use. You can set things to be up in high memory, but guess what? Part of the functions don't work in high memory. I can't even remember. I can't remember any of them that don't. But a lot of the DOS X something calls.
It's documented in OS2 safe.h and
Yeah.
That's the documentation.
Yeah, that's the whole documentation. But if you try to load one of your programs high and it doesn't work, you want to go figure out which ones are the DOS functions. Because what's happening is they don't thunk, so whatever's in the memory, which is up high, doesn't get down into the 16-bit
You
code.
mean they don't copy? It's a
Copy.
little worse than funky. Funky
Yeah.
would be okay.
Yeah. And what's even more interesting, large file and also large file support in these old programs, it's not going to be automatic except, I think it's on the next slide. Oh no, this is the other one. I'll get back to that in a minute. Some Watcom considerations. This is the Win message box 2. There's one of the dialog boxes, obviously, for you to pick if you answer yes or no or whatever you might. That's the button struct in Open Watcom. That's the button struct in the IBM toolkit. Now, guess what happens if you just put the variables followed by commas? It doesn't work. Because obviously that second little piece that they put in for the pack byte is now getting the ID for the button. So that took me a while to figure that one out. It's like, because I essentially lifted the code out of the programming guide, the IBM programming guide, but of course built it with Open Watcom. I won't guarantee that's the only time that this is going to happen. You won't find something like that. So think about things like that if something just doesn't seem right.
Could you fix it with packing?
Pardon?
Packing
Well,
switch?
Yeah, you could. I could fix it, but
Well, the real
I had to know what was wrong.
No.
It was easy to fix once I knew what was wrong.
But that's not really the question. The real question is why the struct's different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Something happened in the translation. Maybe, someone else built their own MTB struct. Because you gotta remember, you can't, the Open Watcom headers have to come from public sources. They can't come from somebody copying the toolkit and taking the license code out.
It was actually changed. Because at the time we were looking at, someone actually changed the code in Open Watcom.
yeah.
They actually changed it.
If I ever get the urge, I'll go find out who did it. It's actually easy enough to do.
I knew who did it at the time, I don't remember now.
Who did it?
I said I don't remember now. I saw it at the time. I saw who did it.
Was it one of the core developers or
It was OS2 guy. It was one of the OS2. It was somebody on the OS.
like Capley or something like that?
No, it was, I don't know if they did it. I don't know if they checked it in, but they were the ones that put the ticket bug in for it. Yuri or I don't remember.
Yuri? Well, Yuri is not really an IBM guy.
No, I didn't say IBM. OS2.
OS2, well.
Yeah.
No, it obviously would be because that structure has no meaning to anybody but OS2.
Yeah, it was somebody that put that. Actually, was it Jan?
I put the ticket in to report it.
Yeah, no, but I'm thinking, it might have been Jan with some of his stuff that had requested that change.
But
Because this is PM, right?
so
Now, we can go
one of the things to be aware of if you're building with the newest Open Watcom is that it is implemented all the large file support. In other words, the command open now calls down the DOS open L, not just